now. Hello, everybody. Thanks for
Hello.
joining. I know we still have some people joining in, so we're letting the room fill up. But I'm going to just start by introducing myself and then introducing the panelists, giving a little bit of a background of a story about why I'm here, why I'm doing this, and what is the gap that we're trying to fill. So thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Bracha Banayan. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I am the CEO of IVDRIPS and Hello Dose. I started on a weight loss journey myself 3 years ago when I gained about 20 pounds during COVID and couldn't lose it. Through this journey, I decided to go on Ozempic, semaglutide, lost the 20 pounds through that, but I learned that GLP-1s are so much more powerful than just weight loss medications. They are essentially probably, I think, one of the most revolutionary medications that exist in our lifetime and will help increase not only health span, but also lifespan. It is something that I believe that could help with bulimia, cardiometabolic health, addiction, inflammation. And we know that 1 in every 8 person at this point is on a GLP-1, but unfortunately over 30% of people go off of it too early due to side effects. And there's a huge, huge gap that's happening right now in terms of the education about GLP-1's medication. And it is my mission to spread that education and the awareness, which is why I brought experts on the field or people who have been on the medication that have changed their life around with these medications to help us become more knowledgeable of how to use these medications, the misconceptions that people have about it, and how to spread the right knowledge. So not only people are aware about if it's the right dose for them, but also if they're going on it, how to go on it correctly. So going to introduce everyone here. First panelist I'd like to introduce is Dr. Adam Deutsch. He is New York City's top cardiologist. He has an office in Park Avenue, and he's been practicing cardiology for over 25 years. So I am really honored to have him on the panel. Dr. Deutsch, hello, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Good, very happy to be here.
Thanks for joining. So I have a question for you. We are going to introduce, I'm going to ask your question, and then I'm going to move to the next panelist. At the end of the webinar, when we're done asking everyone questions, everyone who's an attendee is welcome to ask a question in the chat box. We will answer as many questions as we can get to. All of the questions that you're asking are completely anonymous, and your name is anonymous, and no one knows you are asking those questions or you're on the webinar. So Dr. Deutsch, can you tell us a little bit about the typical patients that you have in your office that are going on a GLP-1 medication, and who are the patients that you put on a GLP-1 medication, and who are the patients that you don't put on a GLP-1 medication? Like, what is the profile of the candidate?
I would say that patients that I'm very eager to place on one would be a diabetic with or without cardiovascular disease, more so with known coronary artery disease and diabetes or pre-diabetes, or a patient who is overweight with cardiovascular risk factors, such as diabetes, pre-diabetes, or even hypertension, high cholesterol, strong family history. Anybody who is significantly overweight, who has had difficulty losing weight by other means. Basically, I view these drugs, I would say, more and more liberally over the past year. It used to be, I guess, very restricted. If you're diabetic, we'll give it to you, and as a side effect, you'll have some weight loss. But now we know that there is a conclusive cardiovascular risk reduction. There's less heart attack. There's less major adverse cardiovascular events when people are on these medications. So essentially, I've become much more liberal giving it out to patients. Now I'm giving it to people who are willing to either pay out of pocket or have some reason to get it paid for by the insurance company, who want to lower their cardiovascular risk, lose weight, get themselves in better shape. So it's really, the type of patient has really exploded to the point where, even if you're not diabetic, even if you don't have heart disease, if you're overweight and you want to lose weight and improve your metabolism, this is the drug for you, because again, there's really never been anything like this. This is a real revolution in physiological manipulation that we've never had before in medicine. So I would say It's not so much who should go on it, is that really who shouldn't. And the risk is kind of small at this point for people who shouldn't, unless you're like absolutely, in absolute perfect shape with perfect sugar with no cardiovascular risk factors, maybe, but that's like not the average American, unfortunately. So the average American that I see in my practice has something going on with them that would put them on a list where they should be on these meds, if that helps.
Yes, thank you so much. Appreciate that. We're going to come back to you with another question. The next person I'd like to introduce is Sarah Stern. Sarah Stern is a neuroscientist who has her own lab called Stern Lab, and she has gotten funding for this lab. She studies day in and day out, researching how our brain regulates appetite and food. I am honored to have you here. I have learned so much from you already, and I'm excited for you to share your knowledge with other people. So can you tell me a little bit more about the research you're focusing on with GLP-1s, and what are the latest research that you are seeing with these medications, and also what you're seeing in your lab, particularly with, appetite and food, but also understanding how the research is affecting GLP-1s outside of just weight loss?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. It's really, really a pleasure and an honor to be here. So in my lab, we are actually really focused on this idea that in the brain, GLP-1 receptors are expressed and distributed across a number of different brain regions. And for those that are not as familiar with how the brain works, so different areas of the brain tend to control different aspects of our physiology and our behavior. And so one thing that us neuroscientists are really focused on right now is trying to understand which brain regions are controlling different aspects of the effects of these drugs. And so, for example, of course, the main effect that most people are interested in is reduction in food intake and body weight loss. And that can be due to a number of different brain regions, primarily one called the hypothalamus. But there are other brain regions that highly express these receptors, and we know that the drug accesses them. So one of them, for example, is the brain region that I study called the lateral septum. And the lateral septum actually connects the hippocampus, which is the area that stores and controls memory, to the hypothalamus, which controls food intake. And it's also a very stress responsive region. And so we try to see if GLP-1 receptors in the lateral septum are particularly responsible for controlling food intake, either based on mood or emotion or based on memories. So for example, if you had a very positive experience at maybe a particular restaurant, that will induce you to eat more there later, so cues. And so that's basically what we're trying to do. And part of the reason that we're so interested in dissecting out these different brain regions is that we know that the different effects have to do with that. So for example, you mentioned addiction, and we've seen a lot of reductions in addictions and cravings for addictive substances. And so we want to be able to understand which brain regions control, exactly food. Maybe some other brain regions are controlling the more addictive drug aspect. And especially for side effects, we really want to know and separate out which brain regions are responsible for the negative side effects, so that maybe we can even improve these drugs in the future and target just the GLP-1 receptors in brain regions that will not lead to negative side effects. So there's a lot of exciting research happening. And actually my lab is like the tip of the iceberg. Obviously it's, the same way it's exploded with patients, it's also everyone is excited about what the potential is. And so we're all just really excited to see what we can find out.
Amazing.
I have to be
Thank you.
excused for 1 second. I apologize. I'll be back in 1 minute.
No worries. Okay, so the next panelist I'd like to introduce is Dominique Renell. Hi, Dominique. Your mic is on mute. I
Hi.
want to say Hi, I want to say thank you for being here. Dominique is a patient of ours who is going to share her journey with us. And I want to say thank you so much because sharing your journey about GLP-1s is something that's very vulnerable and you have to be open to doing that. And I appreciate you being open to share a vulnerable part of your life with other people to help other people take control of their health and live a better life. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your journey with us.
Thank you. I'm
I
grateful to be here. My life really has changed in the last 11 months I've been with you guys and been on the medicine.
Yes, thanks. So can you share a little bit more about, your story in terms of what led you to go on a GLP-1 medication? How many pounds did you lose and how long? And a little bit about, the results that you got.
Sure. So I have just had my second child and I had really put on a lot of weight and I was stuck in that newborn phase, nursing as well, which made me put on even more weight, which was very different than my prior pregnancy. So just in a bad way and just stuck in a bad phase. But decided to go on the medicine because I did know of a few people who were taking it, but they were kind of doing it independently and I didn't feel comfortable with that. So that's what led me to you and your company. I found having the guidance to be the real game changer and really what set me apart from anyone else who I knew was on this journey as well and taking the medication. I'm down 80 pounds and
Wow.
I feel fantastic. I have not a pain in my body. And it's not only been about the weight for me, it totally rewired my brain. I don't need anything at all as far as like when I wake up in the morning, I don't need a cup of coffee. I don't need, I had gone back to smoking, which was something I did when I was really young, and I never thought I'd go back there. But again, I was in the trenches of early stages of motherhood, and just the stress brought me there. And I was struggling with that and found myself back to just being addicted to food, to smoking, to drinking coffee. And now I just every day wake up and every day is easy and great and I have control and I just can't say enough positive things. I really did not have one bad side effect at all the whole way through.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I got to record that and make that an ad. Thank you. That was great. Appreciate that. Thank you.
I mean, it's the truth. It really has changed my life. So, and anytime the side effects I had was a little redness at injection sites, which was maybe a couple months in. And right away, a phone call to my nurse practitioner. She got me some hydrocortisone cream that was fixed. And maybe here and there, if I ever did overeat a little bit, I would wake up with a stomach ache. But that was like the extent of it, which was nice because I knew that I went too far and my body was reacting to it. And I knew better the next time around.
Yeah. Good feedback your body was giving you. Wow. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing. Okay. So going to go back to, Sarah, I have another question for you. So, in clinical practice, we are seeing patients report decreasing cravings, not just for food, but also for alcohol and cigarettes, as Dominique just mentioned that it helped her with her as well. From a neuroscience perspective, can you tell us what's happening in the brain? Because I am very interested in understanding this more because I believe that these drugs are going to help us with addiction. And, we're still trying to understand what's happening in our brain. So if you can shed us some light on that.
Yeah. So first I'll say that we've actually in, basic research. So what I do, we've sort of known about this for a long time. So, we've known about the weight loss effects since the 1990s, and we've probably known about effects on addictions for almost as long, maybe 2000s. So, and for us, it's really not surprising because for anyone that studies food intake, we know that what that really is in the brain is just a reward. And the brain has, this constellation of regions that control reward behaviors, or we even call them motivated behaviors. So essentially anything that you're motivated to do. And motivated behaviors usually are things that we need to survive. So the biggest one is food. It's our most common natural reward, but also social interaction, sexual behavior, and then addictive substances. And so addictive substances are not natural. And because they, are not natural, what they do is they hijack the brain's natural reward system, which is essentially designed for food. So everything that, happens in your brain in response to addictive substances is essentially a very similar thing that happens when we're exposed or eating food, just sort of like hyped up to the max, and then with much more negative consequences. And so because GLP-1 receptors are so highly expressed on these reward centers in the brain, when you activate them, you essentially dampen and like push down all of that reward activation, whether it's to food or to caffeine or to addictive substances like smoking and drugs of abuse. And so it's essentially just the same mechanisms and the same exact brain regions at play, and the medication just targets them in essentially identical ways.
Wow, cool. That's amazing. And what's happening in our brain with things that we see with the common side effects, so like nausea that people are having? What's happening on a neuroscience perspective? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so the same way that we have all these brain regions for rewarding behaviors, we also have brain regions that control specifically nausea and vomiting. And so you can sort of think of the brain as having like three like major parts. You have like the frontal part, which controls like decision making and cognitive abilities. And you have this sort of subcortical areas, which actually are like hypothalamus, septum, amygdala, which people usually know for its role in emotion. And so those are all these sort of emotional reward areas. But then we have these brainstem areas all the way at the base of the brain and at the back, and they control vital functions like breathing, heart rate, and also vomiting and nausea. And so GLP-1 receptors are highly expressed there also. And so we essentially know that, not for all the gastrointestinal effects, but at least for nausea and vomiting, we know exactly which brain regions they are, and they're specifically these brainstem ones. And so that's, one of those big areas of research that we're interested in, is how can we actually bypass those so that we can only target those reward centers and leave these, nausea and vomiting centers sort of behind.
Uh-huh. How do you replicate the drug without it affecting that center, that it doesn't, cause those side effects of nausea? That's very cool. Thank you. Thank you. So Dr. Deutsch, beyond weight loss, what cardiovascular and metabolic health are you seeing with patients? So besides for the weight loss, what else are you seeing in your practice with patients? And also, are you seeing patients go off certain medications? So they go on a GLP-1 and then they're going off other medications?
That's a very good question. So, from a individual standpoint of watching my patients as they take the medications, with weight loss often comes a reduced need for blood pressure medications, and oftentimes less need for cholesterol medications. Now, a lot of the metabolic conditions that we have, such as hypertension, hyperlipidemia, much of it is genetically determined. So, it's sort of a combination of, people, we do have some control over our blood pressure with the kind of life that we lead, but we don't have absolute control. There are patients who are very, very overweight who do not have hypertension or high blood pressure, and there are many patients who are very skinny who do. So it's not a one-to-one, but overall, there is an association between weight and high blood pressure. So definitely if people lose a substantial amount of weight, 10, 20 or more pounds, their need for blood pressure medication often is reduced. Cholesterol medication the same way. Like if they only needed a low dose of cholesterol medication to get to goal and they lose a significant amount of weight and they're eating healthier, it's possible they could certainly reduce the dose and maybe even come off the medication. So that is also a benefit because my philosophy is I only want to give the medication that is required at the lowest possible dosage to do the job. So if I can do that job with a lower dosage or even get rid of it completely, that's fine. Some people cannot come off the blood pressure medications, but there are some who can. And it's sort of individualized. There's no way to know what will be in that person. I always tell them, lose the weight, and then we'll see what happens. So,
Yeah.
but definitely there is often a reduction in the need for medication. On a larger scale, there have been larger studies looking at the use of these medications, and there's just an overall lower risk of heart attack, stroke, death from cardiovascular disease. Now, whether this is from the byproduct of just having lower blood pressure and lower cholesterol in these people, or there are other factors such as anti-inflammatory effects that could affect the endothelium or other aspects of the vasculature, which could lessen the risk of progressive atherosclerosis. That remains to be seen, but certainly this is an area that will probably be studied at length in the next 10 years, whether there is a sufficient anti-inflammatory effect on the vasculature, that it has an independent effect outside of an anti-hypertensive or anti-lipid effect as a byproduct of the weight loss, just an independent primary effect on inflammation, and whether the GLP is a vital role in vasculature or endothelium, remains to be seen, but it certainly could be. There's less heart failure. We know in people who take these medications, there's certainly a less risk of heart failure, and certain markers of heart failure seem to improve. So it's a very exciting thing. So I think we're in the relative infancy of the broadened benefits of these medications. I think it's being observed that lots of exciting things potentially could be happening. And I think in the next several years, we're going to tease out which of these things are really have statistical validity, and then determine maybe mechanistically how they're happening and whether we can, target certain patients. We now have a certain group of medications to treat various illnesses. Like it's possible a GLP-1 inhibitor may be one of the medications to treat heart failure. That might be a class 1 indication in the next 5 or 10 years. Who knows? So the role is definitely growing. The research is growing. And I think, every now and then you get a revolution in cardiovascular disease and other aspects of medicine. And this is sort of one of them, the ability to hit these receptors. So that's it.
That's amazing. I mean, that's amazing to be practicing in a time where, revolutionary drug is being developed, and, we're being able to see it on a scale of millions of people. Would you say that due to this medication, do you think that we're just in general going to see less cardiovascular risk, that we're just going to see less people getting heart attacks and strokes because of these medications?
It's hard to say because, right now there's a very, very big trend to very aggressively treat blood pressure, cholesterol, anti-smoking, weight loss, everything. So to say that adding this on would cause a massive reduction in cardiovascular disease would be hard to say because there's so many confounding factors, but certainly it will be one of the positive things that will help. So I think it will help push along the overall reduction in cardiovascular morbidity and mortality that we're already seeing in the last several years. I mean, if you look at the chance of dying of a heart attack today compared to 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it's markedly less. So I do think these medications are going to have an effect. I think it may take a while to really see that because, the incremental benefit in the relative short term. I mean, we do know from the studies that there was a 20% reduction in, major adverse cardiovascular events. Whether we see in the general population suddenly a marked drop, and whether it would be attributable to that or just keeping cholesterol exceedingly low, which is also something that's very, very important. It'd be difficult to tease it out, but nevertheless, whether or not it has a massive effect or a moderate effect, I think it's going to be, and already is, recognized to be a very important contributor, a contribution to improving cardiovascular health. Definitely. It's
Yeah.
already there. It's already fully ingrained in the mindset of, all physicians that this is a drug that really needs to be strongly considered in a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Very
Sure.
helpful. Dominique, I have another question for you. So, as you went on your weight loss journey, what was the biggest lifestyle habits you had to change, since starting the medication, and how has it improved your quality of life? So you touched upon this a little bit, but if you can tell us a little bit more. So I know that, you lost weight, so the number of the scale changes and, the size of the clothing that you bought were different, but in general, how has this improved your life in every other interaction?
So the biggest change is probably just I just stopped thinking about food and obsessing over food. So again, back to just my whole brain felt like it was rewired, and I wasn't focused on what's the next meal, which was the place that I was at. Again, before I picked up smoking again and I was nursing, it was always about, staying fed for the baby, to produce. So I was kind of stuck in that mindset from being that way during my nursing journey. So that was unbelievable to just wake up one day. And I had a friend who just started this week, and she said, "What should I expect?" And I said, "Just expect to not even think about food at all." That's truly what happened to me. And still to this day, I'm 11 months in. And yes, I eat because I know I have to. And that's the only time when I lose weight is when I eat. If I find that I have a busy week or hectic and I'm not really fueling my body, I don't see the pounds really come off. It's when I'm actually eating, that 2 to 3 meals a day and fueling the body. That was definitely the biggest change, just the my brain changing. The body was like something that followed, and the weight coming off and just feeling more comfortable in my skin. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yes,
Great.
And I
sure.
think it's amazing also, like, just the evolution of how things have changed. I mean, it was just a few years ago that, most of the medications to help people lose weight were all stimulants, basically, like amphetamine type stuff, essentially. I mean, it's not really the same. It's kind of like legal cocaine. It's basically a stimulant that just turns off some of the appetite stuff. And there was little else. And then, there were side effects associated with those medications. And that was really just about all we had. And then there were side effects from that. And that was really it. And then, if you went from there, okay, if that's not working, then there's like a gastric bubble. Then there was gastric bypass and a gastric sleeve and stuff. But now I hardly ever refer people for gastric sleeve. The vast majority of them are getting referred, to try to get this medication, this class of medications, I should say. I can't remember the last time I referred somebody for a gastric sleeve. I'm desperately trying to get them approved for these medications instead. And we've come such a long way in just a few years since just giving people stimulants, I mean, to just try to, suppress the appetite in a rather primitive way. And now we're literally going into the, regions of the brain that deal with these types of reward and satiety and what satiety means. And so I think it's a very exciting, development in sort of, molecular medicine, if you will, that we've come a long way. Anyone, do you agree, Dr. Stern?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually jump in and say that I think, Dominique, what you're saying about how it rewired your brain really speaks to me because, for neuroscientists, we have long been trying to combat this idea that being overweight or having obesity is, due to deficit in willpower, that, there was this idea that like people were just lazy, and if they just only like would just control themselves, everything would be better. And what people are noticing with these drugs is that it just changes the way your brain actually works. So it's not that it's people's fault, right? That they were over consuming. That's a result of just like your brain makeup and your brain chemistry. And it's an amazing thing that we've figured out ways to actually change how the brain works and how it reacts to food, and shows that, it's not a personal failing. It's just like how your body works, the way it responds to anything else in the environment that you don't have, necessarily control over.
Right. I mean, definitely, like just like there's genetics involved in like your lipids, right? There are people who eat healthy but have high cholesterol, and they clearly inherited a lipid profile. The genes that regulate cholesterol production and LDL cholesterol production in the liver are clearly genetically determined. You usually inherit it from one or both of your parents, and there are some people who have amazing cholesterol no matter what they do, and some people with terrible cholesterol no matter what they do. Everyone has there's a polymorphism, and there's everyone looks differently. I mean, we all have hair color genes, skin color genes, height, everything, but there's subtle differences in the makeup of these genes that really is everything, and determines the expression and what the gene actually looks like in an individual. So if I have a patient with a very high cholesterol who eats a certain way, another patient who eats the same way and has a different cholesterol, it's really it's exactly the makeup of their gene, the subtle differences in the gene that still regulates what it is, but also it does it differently. It functions slightly differently. So some of these are teleologically exist because we should be food seekers, right? Because we lived at a time through most of the existence of human beings where food was not in an abundance. And we just look in nature, right? Look at nature. Look how animals in the wild spend a major point of their life getting their next meal, right? That's a major part of their life, is what am I going to eat next, right? We are animals. We are the same type of deep in our brain, not the higher stuff that makes us write Shakespeare, but the deep stuff that keeps us alive. It's the same exact thing. We have a craving for basic fundamental needs, and we can intellectualize them. I mean, we can decide we're going to fast one day. We can do different things that intellectualize. We're not like literally just simple programmed robots that just go from thing to thing. We can try to control our behavior, but at the end of the day, we are sort of defined by these basic needs. We have to sleep, we have to eat, reproduce, crave social companionship. I mean, drink water. I mean, like there's a lot of things like that. So, and everyone has subtle differences in how these particular genes are regulated. So there's some people who just can't lose weight. They just can't stop eating. And it's not like you just say to them, just stop, will you? Like, that's not realistic, because their appetite centers may be programmed differently than other people's appetite centers. So all of these subtle differences in our genetic makeup really determine the aggregate of all of this. So it's based on fundamental needs for survival, plus just genetic variability. So
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
I hope I'm not going off on a tangent too much, but
No, this is great. Very, very informative. Thank you. So Sarah, one of the questions I had for you is, when people go on these medications, and then some people are able to go off of it and keep the weight off, or, and then keep the food noise off, and some people regain the weight. Close to 80% of people actually regain the weight after they go off GLP-1s. Those are the facts. There's 20% of people that don't. What we do at Hello Dose is we try to make people, those 20%, they don't regain the weight. And it's all about the teaching and education we give them on it. But I would like to know a little bit more about what's happening in terms of what you're seeing at your lab, different studies that you may do with mice and their behaviors change, right? When we go into GLP-1, like Dominique just said, her behavior changed. She wasn't as interested in coffee. She wasn't as interested in, I guess, eating extra food or portion control or food noise, something. Her behavior changed due to these medications. So these medications are changing our behavior. But what happens when we go off it? What are you seeing in terms of the mice's behavior? So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, the mice they react essentially like humans. So actually, I would say in mice, it's pretty much near 100%. They 100% all will regain weight as soon as the drugs are stopped. And so, the GLP-1 medications, you can think of them almost like Tylenol, right? You take Tylenol and it lasts 6 hours. And then if you still have pain and the Tylenol wears off, you're going to be in pain again. So the GLP-1 medications essentially work the same way. They target this specific receptor. And what they've done is, the natural peptide only lasts a few minutes, right? So that's why a big misconception is this idea that you can, boost your natural GLP-1 and you don't need the drug. And that's just not true, because natural GLP-1, endogenous GLP-1 lasts, maybe an hour max, right? And so as soon as that hour ends, you will be hungry again. And so the drug is engineered to make it last longer, so about 7 days. But once it wears off, it just doesn't, it literally just doesn't work anymore. So I think there are definitely, this goes back to what we were just talking about individual variability in genetics. There's going to be some subset of people that genetically are made up where they, are able to use the drug to learn to change their habits. The habit system in the brain is a similar but different system than the reward system, and it's very strong. It's very, very challenging. I mean, you just know that from life, but also from neuroscience, that it's very challenging to change habitual circuits and behaviors once they're ingrained. And there's some subset of people that, must be genetically wired to be able to more easily change their habits, and the drug enables them to get to that point. But most people, will need to be on them for, this is more of a clinical question, but, what we see so far
What
is
you're
that most people
what you're
need to be on them.
I agree. I think it's similar to when I have people with high blood pressure or high cholesterol. I have people go on blood pressure medication, and then their blood pressure becomes normal, and they say, "Oh,
Yeah.
great! Can I stop taking the pill now?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, your blood pressure is going to go back up." I kind of view it as like a spring, like these medications artificially push the spring down, and put it where it wants to be, and if you take away the medicine, the spring just bounces right back where it used to be. It's not the fault of the patient, So some people, maybe they train themselves to eat a certain way, but it would have to be tremendous control to be able to resist the same temptations I've had off the medications. It's not their fault. It's that this is why they're wired. And, again, there are survival benefits why we have these types of things, why we're hungry, like why we get hungry before we're starving to death, right? We don't get hungry when we're basically ready to keel over and die from lack of food, right? We get hungry when we're a little bit low on food. We get thirsty when we're a little bit low on water, because we're not going to wait until we're dying of dehydration to feel thirst. We're not going to wait till we're dying of hunger. There's reasons why we're wired like that from a survival standpoint, and appropriately so. Some people may be wired to have a raging appetite early on, and that's just the polymorphism, if you will, or the genetic variability of how they're wired. And so that's why I'm sort of, like, I tell patients, like, why would you stop the drug? Like, why would you? You'll be back where you started from. So, I view it as like anything else I give people. Like, look, this is the reality. I view it like a thermostat. Your thermostat is set wrong. We can't fix this, but we can absolutely put it in a normal place with medication. So just stay on the drug forever. As far as I know, there's no data that these drugs are harmful long term, except for an extremely tiny subset of the population that has a genetic abnormality where they are prone to getting certain types of tumors. But that is a very, very small, almost insignificant subset of the population. So the vast majority of the population, as far as I know, there's no data that they can't be on this stuff forever.
Yeah. And I will add, while most people will regain the weight, the real trick to keeping the weight off is exactly what Sarah said. And it's very hard to do that, but to really change your habits while you're on the medication. And that is really the education gap that exists in the market, where people do not understand that the dose that you're on will actually determine a lot about your future, meaning how how much guidance you're getting, how much control the medication has, and how much control you have. And when you go on a dose that's very, very high and you have absolutely no appetite to eat, and you completely push down that place in your brain that tells you you're hungry, then you grow you're not cultivating this place for you to develop habits, versus just shutting down the food noise and then saying, okay, I want to live a life where I'm not going to do this. I am going to eat this. I'm going to start eating foods that are going to satiate me, because whole foods actually deliver this gut and brain connection much better than foods that are processed. Like foods that we eat that are processed with a lot of sugar, our brain just doesn't register the level of fullness that it does with whole foods. And so when you go on these medications, it's such an important time to start changing those habits. It's really hard to do. So imagine people trying to do it without the medication. But if you do it with the medication, I think there's some hope. If people do want to go off of it, potentially they won't regain the weight. But I also agree that there's no reason to go off these medications if it's working, it's helping you. But if someone does want to go that route, I think it's going to be hard work and dedication. But it will be possible for some people, but majority of people, it won't be. And it's going to be really changing those habits that should be happening while you're on the medication. Like if you're developing the habits and saying, okay, I lost the weight, now I'm going to start eating healthy, it's definitely not going to work. You need to eat the foods that are going to satiate you and develop those consistent habits and do what makes sense logically versus like what's emotionally driven. So this is like so important that people don't understand about these drugs, that the dosing and how much control that they need to learn while they're on it. Because when you cause someone to not feel hungry for months on end, there's a lot of other serious side effects, and they also just don't learn new habits. So Dominique, I have another question for you. And I know we're going to take some questions from the chat, and then just if everyone wants to just share one last thing. But have you shared with your family or friends that you were on a GLP-1? I mean, now, and also when you just started your journey, because it is a very, people still have a lot of shame around these medications. There's a lot of still, taboo where it's like, oh, you took the easy way out, which we're seeing that still doesn't matter. Even if you go on these drugs, you still have to change your habits. And, were there, or do you talk about it freely? And also, if there is a message to anyone that you want to give out there, like what would the message be to them, that how it helped you, and what would the message you want to be for people who are contemplating these medications?
Yes, I do talk about it. I do tell, my family and friends that I want it, and I have great things to say about it. And I think what sets it apart is being with IV drips and having the support. I remember, all through these months, every time I'd have my check-in and get my medicine again, I would be like, I just don't want to eat. And my nurse practitioner would spend a lot of time with me on the phone telling me that seize this moment to learn the new habits. So I will say that I think there's a lot of hope coming off of it. I've started to lower my dosage. I still feel great. I will say that last day of the week, I suddenly start to get a little bit more hunger back, but with lowering my dosage and knowing what I know, and just learning the new habits of, I can't eat that. If I eat that, I will gain weight again. If I eat that, I won't feel good, has really been enough for me to lower, my dosing, do it successfully, and feel open about it in a whole new realm to tell people, like, I know you're worried that you think you have to be on this forever, but there is hope to come off it and be successful, and like whatever works for you. For me, I would love to continue on lowering my dosage and be off of it, or stay on like a maintenance of a micro dosing, because there are amazing benefits to it. On top of my losing weight, I was waking up with a lot of aches and pains, and that wasn't a good feeling, having young children, so now I wake up and I spring out of bed. I don't have any inflammation in my body whatsoever. And that's just, I don't ever want to go back there. Once you get to this point where you feel good in the mind, in your body, and you see how nice it is to live life again. I said this to you before, Bracha, and I've said this to a lot of people. If I truly feel like it worked like an antidepressant that I didn't know I needed.
I love that.
Because
That's great.
again, it's
Congratulations.
like you're living life, you feel good, you have control, you know better, and you move forward with that. It's a miracle. For me, it's been a miracle drug, and it's making me now live the life that I've wanted. I always wanted to live, and I think everybody would want to live like that.
Yeah.
Congratulations, that's amazing. And maybe what Dominique was just alluding to about the microdosing, it may be possible once weight goal is achieved to basically reduce the dose if you can't come off completely, and just take a small dose just to take maybe a little edge off the appetite so that you have enough willpower. Let's say you've gained some control of your own, maybe not enough to be off the drug, but enough to be off maybe 75% of the drug. So you have a balance now between you take a little less drug, it just does the last bit that you couldn't do on your own, and yet you have the willpower of your own as well. And together, that's sufficient to maintain, whatever weight you want.
Yeah,
So
especially
great.
these medications change a body set point. So once you're able to change the body set point, which is so hard to do naturally, it's easier to kind of like cruise through that, which is like what we're gonna do with you. Like when we titrate up and we titrate down. And Dominique, a lot of people, I just want to touch on this for a minute, because a lot of people feel, there's still so much stigma and misconceptions around these medications. And even though they're like more than 1 in every 8 persons taking it, and the company's worth more than the country itself, and they're changing millions and millions of lives, and there's research on it like no other drug almost at this point, there's still people that are nervous about it. And there's still a lot of we haven't still shifted our mindset to chronic obesity being something that we treat as a medical management versus it being someone's fault. And so there's still a lot of shame around it. And what would you tell someone who feels too embarrassed to go on these medications because they feel so bad about themselves that they can't lose weight alone? Because there are a lot of people like that who live in this place where they can't admit to go on it. Their ego is like, I don't feel good about myself, but they still can't even take pictures of themselves or look in the mirror, but they feel so bad about themselves to go on these medications because they feel like they should do it by themselves. And what message would you give to those people? Because I know there are a lot of people out there that want to say what you're saying.
Do it. Whatever you have to do do it, do it. For me too, like the expense of it, we're small business owners, so we pay for health insurance, thousands of dollars a month. So to take on another expense is not a good feeling when you can't go through insurance. And before I came to you, I had went for physical and I tried to get it through a doctor. I went to my local pharmacy and it was double the price. And it deterred me. But this has been the best investment I've ever made in myself, and definitely cheaper than going to get a mommy makeover. So, and in the interim, you learn new habits, which is really what you need to do anyway. So I would say do it, try it. And if it makes you sick or if it doesn't work for you, it's something you can come off of. You can stop.
Yeah.
So I think you should just try it.
Yeah. And there's no shame in using medications that like help you, and you see that you're living your best life. So I'm really glad that you gave it a shot. No pun intended.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you. Sarah, would you like to share anything else? I know I want to touch upon a little bit of like misconceptions that people, think about these drugs and what you're seeing in your lab, or just anything else that you'd want to share about GLP-1s. You're on mute.
Sorry, because someone barged in before. So I think I already touched on some of the misconceptions. So, this one about boosting natural GLP-1, which is just false. And the misconception about willpower, that, weight loss is a question of willpower, I think is also proven false, definitely false. The last one, that I think I hear sometimes people say, which deters them from using the drugs, is that they think the drugs were designed for diabetes and not for weight loss, and therefore like it's not either correct to use them for weight loss or it's not fair to use them for weight loss. And that I think is also a very big misconception because, as I mentioned earlier, we've known about the weight loss effects since the 1990s in preclinical research. And what I think a lot of the public doesn't realize is that clinical trials are very expensive, and to do a clinical trial costs millions and millions of dollars. And so they choose what they're going to study in a clinical trial very carefully. And diabetes was a natural choice just for logistical reasons because of the healthcare dollars that we spend on it, the number of people that it affects, and probably other complicated reasons. But the idea that we didn't expect it to have an effect on weight is just not true. So there shouldn't be any reason that people feel that it's a diabetes drug that's not for weight loss, and they should feel totally comfortable with that aspect of it. And then, not a misconception, but the last thing I'll say is that I actually really think that these drugs are also going to start to change our food industry and our food supply. Like, we live in this environment with all of these highly palatable, highly processed, terrible foods for us, that drive a lot of this overeating. But because so many people, 1 in 8 are on these drugs, it's moving food companies to actually design their products to be healthier, which is going to have this like cyclical effect that's going to be beneficial for everyone, whether or not you're on a drug. So I think we're really in a very amazing and positive era for health and weight management.
Yeah, I
have
agree.
another thought
I
on
really,
that. Back to just the expense involved. I remember first time going on it, someone was questioning me about the cost, and I said, the offset of what I'm now not ordering takeout every week and not scrambling, and I cook for my family now every single night because I could think clearly about what to cook, and I'm not hungry while I'm cooking, or my mind's not elsewhere. So it's just basically like we've shifted where the money's going, and we're
Yeah.
spending it more wisely, and everybody's become more healthy in the house because of it. So it's really just changed my life again.
yeah. And the cost of illness or sickness is, by far
Yeah.
more.
Mhm.
I have patients who I give the anti-smoking drug Chantix to, which is the best anti-smoking drug there is. It blocks the nicotine addiction center in the brain to some extent, and so there's nothing better, at least pharmacologically, for smoking cessation. And they complain about the cost. I said, just think how much money you'll be saving by not smoking anymore.
You should give them this drug to stop smoking. I can attest to that.
It's 4 months.
Yeah.
It's 4 months, like a 4 months treatment. The point is that, in the long term, we're looking at the long term. What is the benefit? Healthier eating, less cardiovascular disease. I mean, your life is priceless, right? So, it's maybe it's extra money in the short term, but you're looking that you're not going to get heart disease maybe 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, and less cholesterol, better blood pressure, etc. So it'll pay for itself down the road.
Yeah.
So in many ways, not only just necessarily longevity, but also quality of life. They say the last several years of your life are the most expensive medically, and also you're the most miserable. Well, maybe this will extend one's life and give us a better quality of life, which I think is also very important as well. And then we have a sense of feeling good, energetic, healthier, and actually being healthier. So I think it's a very exciting class, and I think we're only beginning now to really appreciate and explore. Excuse me, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. Just the very
Need to send you a trip.
Yeah. The wide array of things that are going to be treated and researched with these medications. I think it's going to be vast, and I think we're going to be having a tremendous use of these meds. And also, the thing I want to mention is, the general trajectory of the price of all medications practically is to have the price go down over time, right? You know, when Repatha came out, you know, one of the injectable cholesterol drugs, it was like $1,200 a month. Now it's like 50. Okay.
Yeah.
So the trajectory is that the price will eventually go down over time.
Yeah.
And then maybe it'll be more readily available to more people. But I think this is going to be, and has proven itself to be, a very exciting class. And I think
Yeah.
people should not worry about going on it. They shouldn't be embarrassed about going on it. They should just go on it. If they need it, they're going to, in 3 months after they start it, or even less, they're going to feel like $1 million compared to before using it, I think. So I think it's a great investment for their life.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely is. And not just, and again, not just for diabetes, not just for weight loss, but we're seeing it. I put patients on it who want to decrease smoking, decrease alcohol use, and we're seeing really great, you know, results. And, you know, this happened when I started prescribing it to patients 3 years ago. I started hearing how many patients are stopping to drink, stopping to smoke, you know, and that wasn't the real reason why we were prescribing. And I noticed this with myself. I stopped drinking alcohol when I went on these medications. So there is so many benefits outside of weight loss for these medications. And now we have a little bit of a better understanding from Sarah of what's actually happening in our brain. So, you know, and hopefully we'll continue to see more research about this. So,
Can I add one last thing?
yes, please.
Is that we didn't even touch on the, you know, there's all these studies now, even for neurodegenerative diseases, for Alzheimer's and for Parkinson's. And so actually, I think the unanticipated effects of GLP-1s are really the effects on inflammation. And those have such wide-ranging implications. And so it is, you know, conceivable down the line that these drugs are also going to help treat or prevent neurodegenerative diseases. So it's really like a very wide array of things that may be treated in the future with these drugs, just to, like, you know, what do you call it? Strengthen this idea that people shouldn't be afraid to go on it. The benefits are only increasing that we notice over time, not decreasing.
Yeah. Do you think it'll help with Alzheimer's?
So they're in the process of doing a number of clinical trials on Alzheimer's, and so far the results are at least moderately positive. So
Wow, that's
Chelsea.
cool. And that like links together with what we're saying about Alzheimer's being like type 3 diabetes. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Someone just asked on the chat, and I want to try to answer one more question. Does everyone feel tired at the beginning? And I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in here, or Dominic, you can tell us your experience. But there are a lot of people that do feel tired in the beginning, especially if you're having a decrease in your caloric intake. But eventually, you're actually going to have an increase in energy because you're not going to have as many sugar spikes, and you're going to start eating food that's like more healthy. And so there may be a small dip in the beginning, but if you're doing it correctly, it shouldn't last, and it should actually increase your energy levels significantly. I've never had more energy in my life since going on a GLP-1. So, Dominic, I don't know if you want to speak on
I
that.
felt the same way. Of course, if you don't eat, if you don't drink water, you're not going to feel great. But I barely drink a cup of coffee. I don't need it. You know, and I was having quite a few a day to just get through the day. So no, you're eating healthy, you're drinking water, you're not drinking, or like you're not doing any of the bad things. So over time, you just feel better, and you keep just getting better and stronger and having more, you know, more energy throughout every day.
Yeah, great. Someone just asked about losing muscle, and I'm going to say, if you're doing it correctly and you're losing weight in appropriate fashion, you shouldn't be losing muscle. And you should be working out while you're on this medication. In general, I mean, muscle is one of the most underrated thing you could do for your body. It's like, talk about longevity benefits. Muscles is one of the greatest things. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that. And then
If we don't have time to go into it, I did a whole Instagram post on this last week, very detailed. And the bottom line is that if you actually look carefully at the research, there's no evidence that you have increased muscle loss on GLP-1s compared to any other weight loss. So when you lose weight, you will lose some lean mass, as well as fat mass. And no matter how you lose the weight, be it exercise, diet, GLP-1 medication, you need to put in resistance training to ensure that you maintain your lean mass. So
Yeah, exactly.
I feel the
If-
same way. I feel like I've lost fat. I've lost some muscle with it, not a significant amount, but I will say that it's easier now than it ever was to exercise. And I find myself doing something that my doctor calls exercise snacks, because I don't have a full hour in the morning to work out. So I'll just stop every hour or so and do 10, 20 squats and just do some weights, free weights around the house and all that. And it's effortless. So where before it wasn't, I was so heavy and uncomfortable. So I think it's easier.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. Thanks. Sarah, thanks for sharing that, because there's so much misconception about like muscle loss with these medications, and you just have to lose weight properly. And whether you go on a GLP-1 or not, if you lose weight too quickly, you lose muscle. And if you don't work out, if you lose weight too quickly and you don't work out, you lose muscle and you slow down your metabolism. And so it's about doing it correctly. So
yeah. So I think it's like you're saying, it's a tool, right? And you have to use the tool correctly.
Yes. And Bracha and her team definitely fill that gap of using the tool correctly and making sure that you understand the importance of what to do when you're on the medicine, not just take the medicine blindly.
yes, thank you. And I will add that, if anyone listening to this, Dr. Deutsch has a program where they do like mobile, I'll let you speak on it for a minute, Dr. Deutsch, but things that you can do at your house where he'll send you equipment where you can actually check your cardiovascular risk at home at no cost to patients. So if anyone is, concerned about their cardiovascular risk, that's something that his practice does that can help people learn how to monitor their cardiovascular risk.
Right, for people with high blood pressure, people working on weight loss, people with known heart disease, or people at high risk for heart disease. We do have a program where basically we give you essentially a blood pressure machine for your house, a scale, an oxygen saturation monitor. You're contacted by a nurse, etc. It doesn't cost anything to the patient. We basically monitor you remotely several times a month to make sure you're adhering to, taking your blood pressure medication, that your blood pressure is actually controlled, that your weight is moving in the right direction, that you're eating okay. We give you support that way. So we have a program in our office that actually works specifically with patients to guide them towards cardiovascular health, because one of the holes in, seeing your doctor is that, you'll come in and then, they'll say, okay, I'll see you in 6 months. Well, it's a really big, long amount of time to just sort of not see somebody. And even maybe you'll have a phone call in the interim, but still, most of that time is essentially, just a black hole of, unknown what's happening till they walk in the door again. And this gives us basically the ability to sort of intervene continuously through that time before they come back to the office to really know what's going on. So we do that. We're doing that program in our office now.
Amazing. Amazing. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
I know we went a little bit over time, everyone. Thank you so much. There's like so much information. I probably can do a webinar for 5 hours and still have more information to learn, but thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.